Oh, okay. Yeah, this is going to make for a great presentation. Okay, this is just an intro talk on software-defined radio and the cheap TV tuner cards, $20 a pop, getting started. Who am I? Justin Ergoski. That's what I draw, what I think I look like, or close enough. I'm not an expert in anything. I do like to build things. I like to break things more. I have my amateur radio license, KB3EMK. Go ahead, look me up, visit the house, come on in, we'll make coffee. I'm a member of the Security Awareness Training Framework group. We meet on Wednesdays and troll hack it, and that's pretty much the extent of what we do. And I have contributed some open source projects. W3AF, getting it to run on Fedora because nobody else would. I'd like to give special thanks to my wife, my daughter, and my unborn kid for putting up with me, and putting up with the combination of those two hasn't been easy either, but well, she's been very supportive in her own unique way. What this talk ain't is groundbreaking, super elite, or super technical. What it is, it's an introduction to using these cheap TV tuner cards as a software-defined radio set and getting you started using GNU Radio Companion. That's pretty much it. History, radio. Early 1900s, a bunch of people invented or found radio at about the same time. There's a lot of debate over who came up with it, but it's not going to make anybody money, so nobody really cares. James Maxwell did a lot of the math. Tesla came up with a working one. Marconi got a different one working. And the first commercial broadcast is from Pittsburgh. Yay. KDKA. What is radio? Electromagnetic radiation that extends from 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. In the United States of America, the FCC oversees all radio communications and licenses certain bands for certain uses, like amateur radio and wireless products not in unlicensed territory, and we'll cover the unlicensed ISM bands in a bit, or now, like Citizen Band and ISM. Anybody seen this chart before? Yeah, you can order them. They're really interesting. They're really big. I don't know if you can still order them since the government shut down and sequestration and all that. Are they? Oh, good. But this just goes over all the licensed bands that they have out there and what they control and what they allocate for certain uses. I bring up the ISM band because it is completely unlicensed, meaning you can find all kind of stuff there that is strange. You are limited to 1 watt fed to the antenna and 4 watts actually exiting the antenna. You're still subject to FCC Part 15 regulations, meaning be nice, don't be a jerk. And the wiki has a ton of good information on the ISM band. And the ISM band, pretty conveniently stolen from the wiki, contains all these frequencies and the bandwidths. And those are kind of, you don't have to follow them, but you ought to, sort of thing. So what is software-defined radio? I stole this from Wikipedia too. It is, I'm just going to read this, is a radio communication system where the components have been typically implemented in hardware, mixers, filters, amplifiers, blah, 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 are instead implemented by means of software on a personal computer or embedded system. Has anybody played with software-defined radio before? A little bit? Okay. They do have a good reason for wanting to come up with these. Industrial uses, a lot of testing. You want to test your different frequency spreads and how things are going to handle being transmitted at in certain ranges. On the receiving side, the TV tuner dongle is not so much use industrially speaking, but some. The military has more of a stake in this because they want less devices used to cover more spectrum. And if you don't have to have, my little Yaesu here broadcasts 2 meter 440, 220, and 6 meter, I think. But if I could have it programmed to broadcast and receive in any of those, in any other frequency, then that's going to be way better than just having to switch radios and keep different packs and keep different chargers. Some history of software-defined radio. They came up with the U.S. military was trying to invent it. They came up with Speakeasy. It's a transceiver platform designed by Hazelton and Motorola. It was supposed to go from 2 megahertz to 2 gigahertz, and to provide interoperability between the different branches of the armed forces. And just a little background, if you ever hear something that's going to provide interoperability between all the branches, it's a lie. It's a flat-out lie. Joe Matola, and if I say his name wrong, I apologize, is considered to be the father of SDR. He kind of came up with trying to get that to work. I had another slide dedicated to how hard they failed, but I took it out at my wife's suggestion. But they failed pretty hard. The cost for implementing it was astronomical. And then came along the USRP, which was considered the first amateur-level SDR. It stands for, and I would forget. Anyway, it's a little box. It goes over Ethernet. You can get these daughter boards. It costs around $1,500 for the box. It uses field programmable gateway arrays to change frequencies. It does transmit and receive. And each daughter board costs about $500. You're looking at $2,000, not including antennas. So amateurs I don't have $2,000 to spend to get one for a hobby. I know people who do. I'm not those people. Recently, at DerbyCon 2012, they gave a talk on these things, RF cats, where they took these nifty little IMEs and created software-defined radios to go between the limited frequency set. I checked it out. It was a pretty good talk. Only specific hardware based on the CC111 chipset. So there were only certain toys manufactured with these devices that they found that they could reprogram. And then the HackRF jailbreaker, created by Michael Osman, who pretty smart guy, and they are doing a lot of work on that. They are still on Kickstarter. They have started shipping some out. It's about $275 right now. There's no daughter boards to buy, and its range is 30 megahertz to 6 gigahertz, transmit and receive, and that's a pretty good stretch. They have what's called the Ham It Up RF converter, which lets you get down to below 30 megahertz, and it was about $30, so $300 all in minus antennas isn't bad for below 30 megahertz to 6 gigahertz transmit and receive. That's pretty good. I'd like to get one. I could probably scrape up $300 way better than I could scrape up $2,000. Although the USRP is pretty nice. So then came along these little doodads. A couple of these guys, Eric Fry and NT Palisari. If I butchered that, I'm sorry again. Both saw the value in the chipset, which is the RTL2382U. Not that that matters, but it's a specific chipset that can go between about 24 megahertz to 1.76 gigahertz. It's receive only, but it was $20. And it comes with an antenna. Not a good one. And if you notice, this one's ripped apart so I can make a dongle to connect to a better antenna. There's a lot of community support for this with GNU Radio, mostly copied from the USRP stuff, but, you know, I'll steal it. It works really well. And if you've never seen one, that's what they look like. Yeah, invigorating. So, now that we've covered the history and the stuff nobody cares about, here's some things you do have to care about. Antennas, yes. Sorry, kids, size does matter after all, which is the third time in this conference you've heard that. Location matters. The closer you are, generally speaking, the better you're going to pick up a signal. And not getting asked weird questions while you're doing it is also important, especially if you want to stay out of jail. Modulation, you kind of have to know what you're listening to, and the radio spectrum is sliced up different ways. And I am not a lawyer. I've never been a lawyer. I don't want to be a lawyer, but there are some things you can and cannot do, even with receive-only software-defined radio. It's like owning a scanner, just cheaper, and you have to build your own antenna stuff. Who knows what that is? Nobody knows what that is? That's the Green Bank Radio Telescope. That'll come into play here in a little bit. Different types of antennas. They got dipole antennas, basically the old rabbit ears, Yagis, discones. So I sent a tweet to Michael Ossman and said, hey, what's the best kind of antenna I could get for software-defined radio? And he tells me, the one you build yourself. I think he lied to me, but that's okay. It was a lot of fun building them. Building is more fun. I will tell you that I've spent a lot of time in my garage with my Dremel and my little angle grinder and my little bench grinder building antennas. I don't think my wife shares the same opinion of how much fun it is to have a bunch of antennas. But moving on. Dipole. Super easy. You can take some speaker wire and make a quick, cheap dipole antenna. I have one of these hanging in the backyard of my house. My wife would not let me take a picture because my yard work is horrible. But it's just 2 lines, back and forth. For receive-only software-defined radio, you really don't care about measurements. If you plan on transmitting, you do want to actually measure out your antenna width. But for what we're doing, you don't really care. It's super easy to build. Yagis. I've actually built one. I was going to build one, but I didn't get a chance. This is that's measuring tape. Somebody took apart a measuring tape, put one on some PVC pipe, and used it as a Yagi antenna. Works really well. Amateur radio club I was part of a while back used to do fox hunting with these things, and yeah, you get some looks from the townies, but they work really well going through downtown searching for a beacon signal. You tell the cops you're doing it before you do it. It works out well. It's useful for directional. This is very directional. There's a signal coming from there. There's a signal coming from there. And you can generally tell the difference unless you get too close. And then you're not going to be able to tell the difference, which is when attenuation sets in. That's a different topic. Discone. You can buy these at Radio Shack. I attempted to build one. It fell apart several times in the process. This is kind of like the honey badger of antennas. It doesn't care. It'll pick up anything. Look at all the radials. I mean, they're very popular for regular scanners, so if you see some of these hanging out in the back, it just means there's a scanner enthusiast in the house. $80 at Radio Shack, minus the poles, and you're going to have you'll pick up a good bit of stuff. And they are slightly complicated to build, and I would have had the pictures, but I didn't get a chance to take those either. Okay, location. More people, more signals. Generally how it works, population density directly correlates to radio frequency, radio density. Here's a fun fact. Remember the giant telescope? We are in what's known as the National Radio Quiet Zone. It was created in 1958 for the Green Bank, West Virginia, which was that one, and the Sugar Grove Navy, yeah, exactly, observatory. There are restrictions in place on transmitting in that area, and they're very tight right next to it. In fact, there's a group of people who have moved there who are Wi-Fi sensitive to try and get away from the Wi-Fi signals because you cannot set up your own home Wi-Fi router. That's right. You just have to work with them to put up a tower, and you have to get them to sign off on it before you set up any sort of transmitter. Yeah, that's not true. No. Yeah, that might be a news flash. Reporters sometimes make stuff up. So generally speaking, it's not exactly always a fun place to play with software-defined radio or radio in general. Moving on. Modulation. According to Wiki, modulation is the process of varying one or more of the periodic waveform, called the carrier signal, with a modulating signal, which typically contains information to be transmitted. What's that mean? Well, you either vary how high it goes, vary how fast you send it, and that's the basic tenet. That's the carrier wave signal. I like that picture. I don't know why. Now, the reason you care about modulation, as I said before, there's tons of stuff out there, and if you don't demodulate something correctly, you won't know what you're listening to, and you're thinking the NSA or the CIA or the aliens are talking and plotting against the other ones who aren't listening in that modulation. Modulation is a kind of a big deal. There is some overlap. As I said before, there's three main kinds of analog modulation: amplitude modulation, AM, old AM signals; frequency modulation, FM; and single sideband, which is basically splitting down the middle of the frequency and using one side or the other, or, both. Who knows what that is? What's that look like? Okay. So, yeah, that's Audacity. See the up, down? That's a digital signal. I had to do it in Audacity because I don't have a real good way of pulling those signals out yet into something I could demodulate them with. As with anything else, there's digital modulation, which I think they separated out just to be weird. You're still using frequency and amplitude modulation, you're just doing it in a digital fashion, except for phase shift key, which shifts the periodicity to represent binary data. All you're doing is taking data and you're taking binary data and representing it in a radio wave. It's really no different than analog, just squarer. That's actually a pretty clean wave. I'm impressed. Okay. Once again, want me to reiterate, I'm not a lawyer, never will be. There are two main laws that I list here: 18 U.S.C. Chapter 119, wire and electronic communications intercepting and interception of oral communications, and the very popular West Virginia Chapter 62, Criminal Procedures, Article 1D, wiretapping and electronic surveillance. These are very lawyeristic languages, and it boils down to this: things you can't do with your software-defined radio. Listening on cellular and cordless phone calls. This used to be a bigger problem, especially when back in the early 90s when it was analog cell phones, and the 900 megahertz came out, and those are analog too. You cannot intercept encrypted or scrambled communications. You cannot sell or import radio scanners that are capable of receiving cellular frequencies, modify radio scanners so that cellular phone frequencies can be received, use the information received for personal gain, use information received to aid in the commission or execution of a crime, disclose information received to other persons, which, that's kind of limiting, depending. There are some notable exceptions, like police scanners. You can listen to the police. What you cannot do is listen to the police while you're robbing a bank to know when the police are coming. Odds are good they're going to drop that intercepting frequencies, charge in favor of the bank robbing charge, but you never know. So, is this legal? Generally speaking, yes, but it depends on two things: what you do and why you do it. Intent still matters in this country, as far as I know. Will you get caught? Maybe. It depends on what you do and why you do it. Bottom line is, don't do illegal things. The onus is always on you not to do illegal stuff. Great. Okay, enough of the stuff. You got your antivirus all up to date. Yes, exactly. Okay, got my dongle. No one's bugged me because I'm sitting around with my, by the way, just a point of fact, this big, scary looking antenna gets you far more looks than Guy pulls out a set of 1980s era rabbit ears at the local coffee shop or whatever. Not saying that happened, but that, oh yeah, you get a lot less looks with the rabbit ears than you do with the big scary looking antenna, which is just an HD TV antenna. Okay, so I got my dongle. I'm going to install some software, find things to listen to it, and profit. Yay! Okay, drivers, receivers, scanners, and GNU radio. That's pretty much, y'all can read. For Windows, you basically go there and get rtlsdo.com. You install it. It installs a driver. And then you install SDR Sharp. And now you have a really good receiver. Yep, waterfall plot. I don't use Windows. I generally run Linux, which has caused apparently some problems. But I looked up the instructions just in case, and I completely forgot about Mac OS. Sorry. I'm sure it's not that hard either, but we'll figure it out. There's another one called HDSDR. Yeah, they really blew their wad on the naming. It stands for High Definition SDR. And I saw a typo. That's great. Huh. It uses a different driver, supports a lot of different chipsets, not just the RTL, but it also supports the RTL, and it's a pretty good receiver from what I could tell. There's a picture. It's just got different graphs. Aren't they pretty? Okay. For Linux, you need to go out to the web, download this random script, and run it as root. Yeah, okay. It kind of sucks. Yeah. If you want to pwn some radio enthusiasts, this is probably the best way to do it, because they will go out and run that build GNU radio. I mean, they will just copy and paste this in without looking at it. And whoever wrote it, I have the guy's name, but he did a really good job. He supports Fedora and Ubuntu, and so I like him a lot. But yeah, it does need root privileges because it is installing software. Sorry. You can go and pick through it and find all the drivers and stuff yourself. Good luck. After that, you're going to need a receiver and Linrad, which is Ncursor's and older, and I had a lot of difficulty getting it up and running. I did get it up and running, but I will not admit to it in public. What I just did. Crap. GQRX can be difficult to install. The latest version is based off GNU Radio 3.7, which is different than 3.6. They've been changing a lot of stuff. And this script only pulls 3.6 for now. Apparently, soon all that stuff will shift up to the right, and everything will be happy and puppies and unicorns and everything. Either way, you can both use your SDR to receive radio signals. GQRX supports multiple modulations. Its analog digital signals are processed as analog ones, so you get to listen to a lot of chirping. And I mean a lot. So if you're really into industrial music, this might be the thing for you, but beyond that, you can record stuff, and I'll play some stuff that I've recorded here earlier. It's a very good general purpose all receiver, and the way I got it working is thanks to it being free open source software, I had to go in and modify the source code a little bit, compiled right up, and runs. That's what it looks like. So when I took this here screen video thing, that's actually the weather service out of the airport that I live near. But I wasn't smart enough to realize that it's picking up my microphone sound and not the sound coming through the sound card with my headphones on. So that's why you're not hearing anything cool. Okay, a scanner. You kind of need a scanner. Or you need to be able to use the internet really well. Either way, scanners are very helpful for finding things. RTL scan is one of my favorite. And let's show you how that works. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's even better. Who wants to give me a range? Come on, frequency range. Oh, hey, yeah, you got to plug it in. I will tell you that when you get started with this, you will spend a lot of time taking and finding adapters and ways to hook into an antenna. You will spend way more time doing that than you think you ought to. What's that now? Yeah, you could buy them. As I mentioned earlier, it had a crappy, and I mean crappy, antenna. So all I did was take the base off and rip the cable out and then soldered it to another. Yeah, I know. This is exciting right here. So what does this tell me? Not much. Yeah, that's it. Doesn't tell me what kind of signal, doesn't tell me where it's coming from, just that there is something there. And then that kind of gets me into birdie frequencies. I've noticed with the RTLS, the TV tuner dongles, they have a lot of what are called birdie frequencies, frequencies that they pick up very strongly, and they tend to be around like straight integer numbers, like 120 megahertz. Just picks up some frequency that's not really there. All scanners have this problem. Some of the new ones, they've worked a lot hardware-wise to minimize it, but it's still an issue. So this is pretty much it. And then you can export this out into CVS. This has a bug that even if you tell it where to put it, it puts it in the home directory anyway. That took me a little bit to figure out. I haven't gone in and fixed it yet, but this is free open source software as well, and it's written in Python. All this stuff is written in Python for the most part. And so back to that guy. Oh, please don't start again. Yay! Finding frequencies. FCC.gov has a really good resource if you have the FCC ID. When I was making this presentation, thanks to some political decisions that were going on at the time, FCC.gov was down, and I couldn't look up anything. RadioReference.com is a really good resource for your area. It has a map. You click on it, you find your county, and it has mostly police, fire, EMS frequencies listed. Those are useful and fun to listen to. Looking at the device will help you. This is a microphone that I was using at church to sing. If you think the presentation is bad, you should come hear that sometime. The lady I was singing with gave me some dirty looks as I was taking a picture of the side of the microphone, which has 668 megahertz on it. They do that because it's easier to do that than it is to try and match up A, B at the back, and I don't know. If you look at the back of this here, Shure wireless transmitter, and I was actually listening to Mr. Ship's wonderful presentation with about a 1 second delay because the frequency of 638 to 662 is printed right on these devices. Finding stuff isn't always hard. Listening to it might be. If you have access to the device, look at it. A lot of time it's just casted into the plastic. All right. GNU Radio Companion. It's a tool that lets you build GNU Radio scripts. It looks like that. It's drag and drop. It is super easy to use. You take your source, this guy, you say, hey, I want to see what it looks like coming out of that. I'm going to pass that through a filter. The narrow band FM receiver takes that, modulates it out. I put it into a rational resampler so I can put it out my sound card without blowing it out. And there's my audio sync. I just put that, and you could listen to it. Basically, the one thing that'll get you is, see, this is orange, and this is orange. Those have to match up depending on whether you're using complex or float. And the exceptionally helpful error message is basically along the lines of something isn't working. That was a good Google search about how to fix that. So just remember, blue has to equal blue in this. If it doesn't, as you note, the receiver has blue on one side and orange on the other. That pretty much means you're going from blue to orange at that point in time, and everything on the other side has to match until you convert it. There are converters, but this is just as easy because you're still going through a receiver at some point in time anyway. The main window just has these blocks that you add. Not hard. Here's a list of the modules that you can add. It has a search, and that is the best thing in the world because you don't always remember which kind of low-pass filter you're looking for, but you could just type low-pass filter and it finds it. They call it generating the flow graph and executing the flow graph. Basically, that's how you say, I need to run this, and then let you run it. All right. So we're going to pull up I will caveat this with I have not gotten the P25 stuff to work. These can be as complex or as easy as you want them to be. And this is a very complex one. You start at your source, you go to an exfoliating sphere filter, and then see these little lines that connect it? Let's build a simpler one. You just come over here. All I do is that. That's my source. I set the frequency, which you can do variables. I set the sample rate, which automatically is a variable. You see this? Currently set to 32K. You can set that up to 2 million, and that's usually what I set it at. So let's make this. Yeah, it likes. And that's 14 megahertz. And then you can come over here and put a sync. So see how it's set to complex? If I set that to float, and all I'm going to do is put this to this. See, that's the error that says orange doesn't match blue. I'm serious. It took me an hour to figure out what was going on. You can count, but I usually end up overshooting or undershooting by 1. Sure, why not? Just an example. And that's all it takes to run an SDR. I was going to build a more complex one, but then I realized it is exceptionally boring to watch me stand up here and do things like that. No, change it. Oh, I forgot to show you LGQRX. Well, we'll do that now. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. Yes, the Fun Cube's another one. I didn't really mention it because I haven't gotten to play with it, but it's along the same lines. It kind of came before all this stuff became popular, but Not entirely. So let's find my other terminal. So right now, as you watch, see in the corner here? That's me speaking. Yesterday we had one of these. Actually, we had the little Bofang, cheap $35 2 meters, sitting listening to the police and other non-illegal things to listen to. And there's about a 1 second delay because of the processing. And you'll note that as I speak, eventually it'll get, the antenna's right there, which causes all the red. Let me go back and get my notebook because I'm not bright enough to bring it with me. Thanks, man. So just arriving Friday night and playing around, I'd say we got about 15 or so different frequencies. So this can be tactical if your target is using wireless microphones, wireless headsets on phones. I'm not telling you that that's legal or you can do that, but it is an option. And that's about all I have for presentation. I was just going to see if we can find some stuff and play around with it. If anybody has anything they want to listen to, which is kind of code for shut off the camera, please.